much more distinguished progeny of what I created. But I also think critical to that is once another person comes on, it's not yours anymore. And that has been a guiding principle. I'm being very, very, and this is, I think, I do have the advantage of being a over 50 entrepreneur who has made good career decisions and done all these things. But to younger entrepreneurs, I think sometimes it might make sense to find some older folks who have a different viewpoint on things. And, for me.
And that's where that spark, there was a spark there when you found your designer.
Well, there is. Like,
you realize...
I call it my Archimedes moment. And the really funny part about it is, and this is probably too much information, but I like to be authentic, is I've got like a couple of different places where I do my best thinking. Mm-hmm. I love to mow the lawn, and because my lawn is very unique. It's got a lot of hills and trees, and the conditions mean there's no one way to do it that is going to work every time. But I find that I can go out there and have my brain working that problem and maybe have those Archimedes moments where I've been working with a problem. Going out in my shop is the other one, but I have a joke. I've got this big jacuzzi tub in this house, and I call it my think tank. And I call it my Archimedes moments because Archimedes, when he got in the tub and noticed volume, like the water went up, he ran, I guess, naked through the streets of whatever Greek city. I don't remember what, it might have been Athens. But I just, for some reason, I think well in there. And it's just a spot where I'll just, again, sorry for the imagery that your viewers have to think about me in the tub, but I guess what I'm getting at is finding what works to create that moment. Right. And the best thing, and I've been fortunate enough being a veteran, but there's plenty out there, especially for disadvantaged entrepreneurs. Find like accelerators and find places that can at least focus your thinking in a way that you can create those Archimedes type moments. But all of them were always like, what's the problem first? You don't invent to invent.
Hi, I'm Matt Levenhagen, founder of Unified Web Design, Unified Plugins, and your host of the Builders Podcast. Here on the Builders, our goal is to uncover the first principles behind building businesses, products, and services. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. And if you find value in our content, a like, share, or review is always appreciated. Let's dive in and explore the roots of innovation and progress together. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are joined by Doug Katz. Or Katz, or Katz?
Katz is good. Katz is good.
Katz, we'll go Katz. All right. Depends on where you are in the world, how you might pronounce that, but we'll go with Katz today.
It's funny. It's funny, like you pronounce it like you were right to differentiate, but everywhere, like you go to places and they'll write CATS on your like order, and you're like, nowhere in the world is it ever spelled that way, though. So kudos to you.
I'm not a cat.
Both the actual pronunciations.
Awesome. Well, you are the CEO of Nulu Knives, correct?
I am, sir.
All right. Well, today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how you built that whole thing and what led up to that. And one of the things that we like to start with is because it really does inform the why behind what you're doing and how you might have done it, is to tell a little bit about your story and
sure,
where you come from. What's your origin story, and how did you become this amazing person in the world building stuff?
Wow, thank you. Amazing is very, very generous. Grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was born in Cleveland. Have a lot of extended family in the Cleveland area, but grew up in Michigan. So Midwesterner through and through. Graduated from East Grand Rapids High School and went into the military, specifically the United States Military Academy at West Point. I was very fortunate. And after that, went to Colorado Springs, served with the 4th Infantry Division as an artillery officer for 5 years. For me, it was very important. I wanted to do my whole commitment. It was at a time when things were drawing down, but I felt very committed to both the taxpayers who had paid my time and the ski slopes that needed me when I wasn't working. So I really loved Colorado, but nice. Felt the call back to the Middle East, the Midwest. I did serve in the Middle East a little bit, but I'll call back to the Midwest. My wife, who I had met in Colorado, was from Iowa. So I had Cleveland and Michigan connections and Chicago seemed like the great place to be. So settled in Chicago, worked through a lot of different industries, and I think that actually is a part of the story in finding out kind of who you are. So worked initially getting out in the rail industry with castings, like big rail castings, for suspension and coupling systems. And that didn't last very long. Cool industry, like big crucibles of pouring metal. It was very cool, but just wasn't my thing. Moved into the telecom industry where I was for about 5 years. And that was when I really learned where corporate America was headed. It wasn't specifically the company I was in. It was more the circumstances. Worked for a company that had a great run out of the suburbs of Chicago. They're still around, but their heyday, they were huge, and really learned about, how the corporate landscape had changed. So moved into lending where I'd been for about 20 some years, where it was still more entrepreneurial, but a little bit still more corporate. And that kind of what's taken me to where I am now. And it's really interesting. There is no like origin story, sort of wanting to be inventor. It's sort of more, it is kind of like a Marvel thing, right? Like it just happens. Where circumstances come together with a certain formula at the timing and having the luck and resources. About 3 or 4 years ago when I had moved from Oak Park, Illinois to where I am in Trout Valley now, and I had recently taken a bladesmithing class, was really getting into making. I had never been a maker. I was always creative, but I never made things. I convinced myself that I didn't know how to do those things, and was fortunate enough to have had a bladesmithing class that my wife had gotten me, and I realized really quickly I was sort of a much better inventor than a bladesmith. I'm not the craftsman the way that people are, but it was more for me about what's a better knife. Like if I was making a machete, like how the use of it more than I guess being a beautiful piece I could sell. I'm never going to be selling. The knives I make myself, I usually gift to people. But at the time, I was having some major issues. I am a disabled vet. I have some upper extremity issues, and that were courtesy of the Army, as well as a pretty full life of athletics and just activity that will eventually catch up with you. So I was having a particularly bad flare-up. It was right before I got my shoulder reconstructed. Couldn't swing a hammer. I also love to cook. Was having some issues in the kitchen, and I was in the shop just kind of hanging out, and I keep a lot of scrap metal around, and there was a circular saw blade. And I'd used some of those before, but it was something I could work with, and I just kept seeing that circle and started going to work on it. And I actually have like a Nulu museum out in my shop, and the original one is out there, and it's ugly, and but it was really functional. And I've been lucky enough to pick up a great team of guys and gals, and we are, we'll have inventory available in April. We're going to meet our Kickstarter demands in mid-March, and we're off to the races. So it's been super exciting, and that's why I love coming on a podcast like this, because I really love to try and inspire other people, because I think sometimes it's people's own things that get in the way. I actually wrote an article over the last couple of days after we initially chatted about your middle age being made possibly your best. Like in medias res, sort of the epic poem, right? Like it doesn't start at the beginning. It starts in the middle when the hero has been through a lot to shape who they are. And after our initial conversation, it got me thinking, and it really, really did, I think, have a lot in me stopping and going, wow, it isn't about fate or anything. It's about everything coming together at one time.
Amazing. Yeah. And just for everybody, just to note, this is our second time chatting because we had technical problems last time in Riverside. Yes. So
we said, lesson, don't get upset about the little things.
That's right. We could do it in a few days again.
Right.
So, great. So there's a bunch of things to unpack there, but I mean, first of all, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
It's amazing. I mean, that's probably that experience in the military. Now I've come from I would say military family. My father was in the Army. He spent 7 years in the Army as he was stationed in Germany for a few years and was in Vietnam 3 times. And
wow!
So they kept sending him over there. But no, I appreciate that. But but I would imagine that, that experience alone, how does that shape kind of how you do business today, or how?
Well, I got to really look, and I didn't do the long career that many of my classmates did. I was, if you count the academy, it's 9 years active duty, very, very, it's your life all the time. And I think that did shape a lot of it, right? I think there is, it's a mix. It's a mix of the pragmatism and the practicality. You look at how soldiers deal with stuff in the field, and they're super resourceful. And I think that there's an aspect of multi-use things that you can do to make your time in the field better and be more effective or whatever. But in addition to that, I think it really shaped the grit and sort of the character. And my team is actually made up a lot of military folks, a couple of West Point guys who I got hooked up with through the alumni organization. And I just think that there is a different viewpoint, how you look at adversity and opportunity and things. When you're, I actually realized in retrospect how much I liked the field. I probably should have stayed in the military. And it's normal to complain about the field, but then when you get out there, it's fun, and there's a lot of different, it's very similar to the entrepreneurial life, right? Where you never know what's coming around the corner. You're dealing with the different priorities. It's never boring. You're making quick decisions. And, that I don't think would have come the same way without having that military experience. I think what really jaded me a little bit in the corporate world is you go there kind of expecting the same degree of, ethics and character. And I just don't think it's there. I think that, and it may have been, right? Like everyone talks about the greatest generation and the degree that they were, 85% of small businesses and things were owned by World War II vets or some statistic like that after World War II. And the reality is, I think that builds a successful company. And I think that, where we're at now is very, very different. And as we're building Nulu, that is part of what we're trying to build into it, is to say shareholder, we're the only shareholders. Shareholder value is super important, but so are a lot of other things, culture being one of those.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to think about the parallels there between entrepreneurship and military and
it is. It is.
So you had this career in the military, and then you got out, and then you got into corporate world, and you did mortgages, I think you said, or
mortgages were the most recent. So again, in the beginning, I was with a company that did rail castings for the international market, so specifically like coupling and suspension systems.
Right.
Then I was in the telecom industry where I did the dense wave division, multiplexing, all kind of crazy stuff. And the early 2000 telecom crash happened, and frankly, that was when I made a certain decision about corporate America. They owed, the company that I had been working for owed me a 15% raise, been documented, and they even were normalizing things, right? So they were like, hey, we're going to wait until March, or it was like January to March, because we're going to have everybody on the same schedule. So you're going to get the 3 months of pay we owe you prorated. Well, market crashes, and they're like, sorry. And that's when I looked at it and said, I no longer want to have my destiny. Like, if I had a good year and I am truly valued, then I have a value. And to allow that to be eroded, and I had a great boss. I still love the guy. I talked to him on social, but it represented to me a shift of, I need to be somewhere where I either am in charge of my own value or that I'm understood more in that regard. And it took me a long time to find it. I mean, again, that was early 2000s. I made it through the 08 crash and things like that in lending. And I think that I just still hadn't found what I was looking for. And I think Nulu was a really big entree to that, where we're even hopefully bringing other products to market and things like that. Like it's more of not a product, more kind of a life that I want to live.
Right. So while you're doing this, you have this career, you're not satisfied, and you're out there looking for things, doing things maybe on the side, trying to figure out, always thinking about a lot of side gigs, trying to find your way to something that you're passionate about and care about, and that
it's funny, and I wish with that I had been better informed of what to learn, right? Like I had an idea at one point where I was at the airport and I saw people walking by with their luggage. And this was early kind of in the cell phone time, right? It was probably 2005-ish. And I'm like, wait a minute, wheels could charge batteries. Like, could you have an integrated battery into a suitcase? And it was a great idea. It was a really good product. But like my partners weren't as committed. Just everybody wasn't where they needed to be. And I realized like that, and it wasn't that they were bad people. It was just I misread the situation. And I had a couple of strings like that. What is, I think the statistic is you need to have 7 businesses. Like the successful founders will have found 7 businesses before they're successful. And I was like, well, let me think back over that. There was that one and that one. And we had some good ones.
I was like, it kind of works out for me too.
Yes, right. Like, but it's weird, right? It's the best way I can describe it is it's the entrepreneurial version of the actor that's discovered overnight who's been working for 20 years, right?
Yeah,
like you
exactly.
see these guys, and you're like, oh yeah, I've seen him. So I just wish I had been better at using the side hustles at that point to better frame what I was figuring out, and it is sort of like the look back, and I would always say don't throw all that away. Right now I can look back at these businesses and go, I understand why. I had a prepping business, I had a leadership development business, and all of them did marginally okay. But none of them hit, and I probably stayed too long working on them and wasn't reading the tea leaves the right way. But you're right. Right now I look back and go, it's the right time now. And that's where I'm really trying to get in the headspace now of, because I will go back and say, God, why, if I figured out what I should be doing 15 years ago. Yeah. And I really owe it to my 19-year-old son who said, no, who went through some great transformation himself. He was like, it happened when it should happen. And I'm like, wow. Like,
well, that's like, exactly right. I've actually said this so many times on this podcast. I have a friend, Will, who, this is going back, way back, like 10, 11, 12 years ago, we had a conversation and I'm like, and it was when I'd gotten into web design development and I'm like, I really love this stuff. Why haven't I? And I was talking to him like, well, I wish I would have been doing programming or something 20 years ago. He's like, no. And he stopped me. He's like, no, Matt, you don't, because all the things you did, all those other things you did makes you unique in the world. And that's kind of your superpower. Like that's what makes Matt unique. And you are going to be better because you have all those experiences, good or bad. But yeah, so that's how I kind of look at it. In some ways, you're probably
a better programmer. It's sort of like they're finding now that kids who do a singular sport can sometimes tend to underperform. They get injured. Like they need to get the center and the muscle and everything from all these different things. And I think there is something to that where perspective drives success in other areas. And if you're singular, you end up singular in that world and it impacts you.
Yep. Yeah. There's a lot of things that inform what I do today and how I help clients and start building my agency and my team and what we do because of all the other things that I did. But anyway, enough about me. So I'm curious about this. So your wife seems like she has a critical role here because she enrolled you in a class to learn how to do knife smithing. Is it called?
She did. Well, what happened? There was a knife maker who she was on vacation in Wisconsin, with my son, and they were kind of fishing at the time, and they met a guy who was a knife maker, and she bought me a beautiful knife. I have it in my displays here, and it's like, beautiful, like kind of a Native American design, but the guy is great. And he had a class that he would teach, and he actually allowed my son and I to do the first and last ever, actually it wasn't last, the first ever father-son class. We went through it together. My son wasn't as into it. The next people, I don't think it worked out as well. But it really got me excited about making knives. I think it was just a cool thing. And for me, and I think this is everybody finding their own authenticity and what they like. For me, it's about a mix of creativity and utility. Like, I really love that you can make a beautiful knife that is a work of art that can also do something. Like, I think it's got this really cool aspect. So, I took a class, and it was about a a week long in total.
Was it just random that she said, "Here, take this class," or was it something
Well, you
you'd
know
been
what?
talking about?
She had she was it's actually fun. She wanted to buy another knife from him for my son. And I think they got talking, and he was like, "Hey, I teach a class if you'd be interested, if your husband would be interested." And I got enrolled in it, and
Huh.
it was fun. It was really really cool. Like the one you can't quite see it in here. There's one over my shoulder that we made. You make like 3 or 4 knives of different types. But he has said to me, "You're the guy who took it further than anyone else," and I think that's an important thing. Like I do think hobbies are a great way to move into other things, and it doesn't have to be a side hustle. So it was a hobby, and originally it was a hobby where I'm like, okay, when I retire, maybe I'll knife sharpen and make knives, and whatever. And again, I found out it wasn't my gig. I found out that it was more about, wow, if I can make a better knife, there's other people, and I'm lucky. I have a great designer. If you saw, like, again, this is like our second prototype. So the new one is much better. This is one that we made in the garage with 3D printing. But if you see the original one, again, it looks like it could have been found in like a Viking tomb. It is not aesthetically pleasing. And again, I've been lucky to find people who bought into the vision, who have the skill sets to turn my vision into what I hoped it could be, and what it's hopefully turning into. I have a partner actually at SHOT Show right now, showing the knife to some people, and we're getting some really good initial feedback.
Nice. So you take the class, and then you're like, "Oh, this is really cool," but you figure out you're not the artist, the craftsman, that
Yes.
So
I'm not.
you're more.
What was it in Kill Bill? I'm not a Hattori Hanzo or whatever, right? Those swords, right? Like that will never be me. And what's nice is
okay.
I found my place because I make decent knives to give to people's gifts. And what I look at is to say, if it's okay, if it's imperfect, because that's the beauty of it, right? It's people look and they say it's as imperfect as the person who gave it to me. So I've really taken them to giving them to people, and I love for me. And this is a weird tangent to go off on, so I'm going to apologize. But for me, it's like my epitaph on a headstone is not what will be interesting. I find it would be interesting if a couple of generations from now, like that knife is something that a family's like, wow, that's really cool. Like, I want that knife. And it gets passed down. Like, I have a knife that was my grandfather's that it looks like it was a bayonet that was turned into a carving knife. And it's just this cool family artifact that is passed down, and I just hope sometimes that the gifts I give people will be that kind of thing, or they'll bury it in their like a Viking, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, but you're still making knives, but you're just not making them for.
I am, and I do it now. It's almost a catharsis of going out there and I spend all my day talking about how this is better than a regular knife or a typical traditional knife. But I still love knives. I did martial arts. I still love making knives. And now I'm on a real kick of like recycling. So I'm making a lot of stuff out of like lawnmower blades that I can recycle. I have some great steel that I'm keeping for the other stuff. But I really like to play around with things. So I was lucky. I found sources for my wood for my handles. I basically am only paying for the propane to heat my knives, and that's it. And so to heat treat and do all that. So it's kind of fun, right? It's more back into a hobby that is feeding what I'm doing for.
Well, that's great because it serves as a good foundation. You're something you really enjoy doing, and then but then you realize, okay, I'm more the inventor though, and if we're gonna. So what was the catalyst to you suddenly realizing this may be more of a commercial thing? Maybe we could bring that. What were you trying to solve? What were you? Because I certainly know your knife is unique and helps people. Where did that come from? Where was that conversation? Were you
it's funny. It's not a conversation. It was my kids kind of going, where you get one of those and they're like, wow, this isn't crazy. And so I refined it a little. I did create a couple of other prototypes, but it was really the family. And I think the lesson I learned there, and it's what I tell other people if they say, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. Don't hide your ideas. Find the people you can trust and run the ideas by them, because you'll unerringly be too close to your idea.
Right.
And there were some ideas that I think if I had better engaged my family constructively, right? So my prepping business at that one point was like, I built it around people, asking people a survey, and that would define how prepared they really wanted to be, and then consulting to help them come up with a plan. It was a good idea. It wasn't represented in a good idea. My kids were always like, yeah, it makes sense, you prep. But like talking to people and saying, well, why wouldn't you, what would hold you back from doing this? I think I could have learned a lot. It might have been a successful business because I would have approached it differently. So for me with this, it was the encouragement from my family. And then I think it's luck. And I heard a great podcast where an entrepreneur, I don't remember the business he started, he said, you make your own luck. And it's trite, but he was talking about, for instance, staying at the bars younger or longer when he was younger. And I think he was selling like fractional ownership of planes, right? Like he had to be in a position. But I found I took the prototype to a friend's graduation party for his son, but I knew he would be cooking. And a mutual friend who's now my partner, he's been my longest partner on this, was a designer, and I totally forgot. I knew what Gordon did, but I didn't have it in context, right? It's like when you're a kid and you see your teacher in regular clothes and you're like, holy crap, like they have a life, right? Like it was that. And he said, we have to do this. So I think getting out there and this, it looks like the much more distinguished progeny of what I created. But I also think critical to that is once another person comes on, it's not yours anymore. And that has been a guiding principle. I'm being very, very, and this is, I think, I do have the advantage of being a over 50 entrepreneur who has made good career decisions and done all these things. But to younger entrepreneurs, I think sometimes it might make sense to find some older folks who have a different viewpoint on things. And, for me, maybe 20 years ago, it would have been about me and me being this and having it, unified to such an extent that it's my identity. And I didn't want that. I said that, like one of my partners said to me one day, he's like, how do you feel about now? Is it kind of yours the same way? And I'm just like, when anybody decided to expend resources and become part of this at this level, it wasn't mine at that point anymore. So I think that whole, and this was about a year's worth of time of really being contemplative of like, wow, what's working and why and that kind of thing. So I don't think it's an event. And I think there's a danger in thinking of like, what was that lightning, that bolt of lightning? Because in a lot of like what we were talking about in the beginning, the same way that you can look at your life as a middle-aged person, like in medias res, right? In the beginning, that you can look back and say, wow, all this stuff creates that mechanism that made this successful. It wasn't that this was successful. It was that there was 53 years of everything behind that to create the landscape and the conditions for it to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse the interruption, but I'd like to take a quick moment to thank the sponsors of the Builders Podcast, Unified Web Design and Unified Plugins. At Unified Web Design, we specialize in crafting custom websites and providing comprehensive design and development solutions to help businesses build a strong online presence. Unified Plugins offers a suite of WordPress tools designed to help you create beautiful websites, enhance functionality, and drive conversions. Explore how these services can elevate your digital projects by visiting unifiedwebdesign.com and unifiedplugins.com. Now back to our program. It's interesting. Yeah, there's not like one event. There's like not a blueprint. Be like, okay, we're going to share something today. Be like, well, if you want to create your own product, this is what you do. Boom, 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 boom. But it's instead, it's a creative process. You find that thing after all your experience and playing around and taking action is a big part of this. Always trying things and then taking it out to like you said, don't hide it. Let people know what you're doing, share it. And, and that's where that spark There was a spark there when you found your
Well,
designer.
there is like
You realized,
I call it my Archimedes moment,
yeah.
and the really funny part about it is, and this is probably too much information, but I like to be authentic. Is I've got like a couple of different places where I do my best thinking. I
Hmm.
love to mow the lawn, and I just because my lawn is very unique. It's got a lot of hills and trees, and the conditions mean there's no one way to do it that is going to work every time. But I find that I can go out there and have my brain working that problem, and it maybe have those Archimedes moments where I've been working with a problem. Going out in my shop is the other one, but I have a joke. I've got this big jacuzzi tub in this house, and I call it my think tank. And I call it my Archimedes moments because Archimedes, when he got in the tub and noticed the volume, like the water went up, he ran, I guess, naked through the streets of whatever Greek city. I don't remember what, it might have been Athens.
Okay.
But I just, for some reason, I think well in there. And, it's just a spot where I'll just, again, sorry for the imagery that your viewers have to think about me in the tub, but I guess what I'm getting at is finding what works to create that moment.
Right.
And the best thing, and I've been fortunate enough being a veteran, but there's plenty out there, especially for disadvantaged entrepreneurs. Find like accelerators and find places that can at least focus your thinking in a way that you can create those Archimedes type moments. But all of them were always like, what's the problem first? You don't invent to invent. What's the problem? What is a thing that just bugs the living shit out of you? And that's the best place to start and say, can I solve this? And then work in that way. And I think that's the best thing. This was probably the most intuitively problem solving where people look and they're like, okay, it looks weird, but I get it, right? It's, people have knife problems and they get it. Other things sometimes it's being able to more articulate and grasp the problem. And that's, I think, where people tend to have these challenges. So for me, I think, again, I guess this would be the good thing. You talk about that lightning hitting, right? But like in a Frankenstein movie, he sets up the lightning to hit, to give life to the monster. And you got to create your lightning moment, right? You got to put the monster on the thing and go up to the top and put the lightning rod and say, okay, let's make this stuff happen now. And I think that's what I've learned. And it's cool. My big problem now is more problems and being incurably ADD, and finding a new one. Like, so there are 3 products that we're working on now, Nulu being one of them, 2 of them in ideation or business planning. And it was all like, hey, and my partners are like, no more, stop. We're going to write them down and we're going to, but it's sort of, but I think also for people finding where they fit there, like not everyone's an inventor. And, like my ops guy, he's a spreadsheet guy, and he'll consistently say, I don't know where you come up with this stuff. My lawyer is the same way. So I think it's understanding if you want to be part of something like that, find someone whose vision you can support and make yourself available. I was consistently in alumni groups. Hey, I need help. Like I said, I need an ops guy. I will trade equity for ops. And it was in a group that I trust. Boom, there's my ops guy. I found my attorney, talking about it. And to a T, all of them are like, Doug, we're with this because of the vision, right? So I think it's working all those things into it, but knowing where you're good, right? We in this conversation, we've kind of going back to like past and present and evaluating the landscape. And I think the genuine part is like, some people like spreadsheets, finding where somebody needs that for what they're doing and becoming part of it. And that would be the great part for them.
Yeah, no, that's very, yeah. It's gathering all the people that kind of have, that bring something to the table and that they're a rock star at or whatever. And, but so tell me a little bit. So you mentioned you're working on other products and stuff. Tell us a little bit more about like the actual, what you learned from the manufacturing process and like what like actually, the steel you chose, and let's get into the nitty gritty a little bit there, but but how you, within that, you probably figure out a process and and now you kind of have your kind of a roadmap to create the next product, right? I mean,
we do. And I think it's less the manufacturing process than the go to market. So what I think I have learned is if you can find someone who knows how to do it. So I'm very, very fortunate as part of our team. I had reached out in the beginning to industry veterans. I reached out to one of the judges on Forged in Fire, and I said, you know what? I'm just going to take a swing at it. I think people will surprise you. I'm pretty cynical on people, but I think people will surprise you. And the CEO of Buck Knives was fantastically helpful. And I'd reached out to say, hey, is this something that you guys would make? Super helpful. I reached out to a guy named Jason Knight. He was one of the early judges on Forge and Fire. Super helpful. It took my calls, said cool knife, gave me some recommendations on manufacturing. One of the guys I reached was part of my team now. So what I found was I got to find smart people. And at 54, I am not going to learn how to manufacture at scale knives. So what I've learned is I'm not good at that part. So finding the people who are good at it, now that has become part of the process. So the way we have arrayed is I'm a partner in a company called Red Leg Innovation, which is a majority stakeholder in Nulu. Well, we set it up that way because what we learned with Nulu, we're going to be able to apply to all these other products. Less so in manufacturing, because one is a cut and sew. It's got other things, but I think what we learned is to say, with our search, here's what we need to find. Because none of us know how to do it. And if we sit on our equity and don't find someone who likes, like I would love to find another 50-something person who's been in a cut and sew business, let's say, for one of my products for a long time, who's like, hey, you know what? I would like to work on something fun now. And to do that. But we have figured out some very, very good lessons about bringing stuff to market. I learned some trust issues. There was a West Point guy who we had contracted with. He was going to act as an agent, and great guy, was out over his skis, and we looked at the relationship too long and said, he's a brother in arms. We're gonna go ahead and give him the benefit of the doubt, and that put us behind 2 or 3 months. Things like that. I think the thing that we've really learned though is how to work with each other and make quick decisions. I think that the advantage there, and what I'm lucky about is the other people on the team really do think the same way. So my design guy, my partner who does design, is not a veteran, but thinks very pragmatically. So, we're like, boom, we make really good decisions. We throw our egos out the door. I think with all this stuff,
Right.
we're very, very careful with that. And I think that a lot of times we try and come up with like a objective, even like a mathematical approach, right? So if we're trying to think of a product, if we're trying to define whether we should bring something to market, we've come up with actually a way of looking and saying, okay, we're going to rank order components of this on what its viability is. And if it's like an 8 or higher, then we say, okay, this got to go to market. There's a timing issue, all that. If it's a 7 to like a 5 or 7 to 4, hey, let's tweak it. Let's see if it's a lower, then we shelf it. Because again, you never know when the circumstances will be that something then makes sense. And I actually picked that up. I saw an interview with Penn and Teller. It was with actually Penn Jillette. And he said when they were looking at skits or tricks to do, if they were not both 100%, they didn't do it, no matter how much one felt. And he said, we probably missed out on some great tricks, but the ones that went to the stage were all good. And that got me thinking and saying, wow, you know what? It's very much about the true leadership, right? It's not about, I say this is how this is going to go. Sometimes that has to happen. But for things like that, it should be a process where, kind of going full circle, I have these guys, like if I look across my team, I've got like 350 years of experience. I guess that's too much if you net out like when you're a baby. So let's say you count like over 18, right? All these guys are sort of my contemporaries. So I would be crazy not to create a system that the Avengers wouldn't really work if one guy did everything, right? So when you talk about superpowers, hey, it's making sure that everybody's are at that table to make the right decisions. And I think it's allowed us to bounce back. It's allowed us to have, there have been some things I look back and I'm like, wow, that would be pretty,
Yeah.
If I didn't have the team I did, I'd be freaking out. But I just have been really, really fortunate.
That's amazing. Yeah, that is fortunate. Yeah, I've known entrepreneurs or partners where ego was in the conversation. It was like we leave ego at the door, and we get into a room, and these guys are really, really, the guys I'm thinking of, really good at coming up with it. You know, they've made tens of millions, if not hundreds, at this point, doing promotions and all the stuff they do. But when they get into a room, they're like, they shoot ideas back and forth, and if one of them shuts it down, it's like the other one's not gonna. You know, it's like, okay,
right.
You know,
right.
just
right.
It's, you know, it's a team effort.
Yeah, I think that, like, I've looked at, like, as out of an Oppenheimer approach, right? Like, if you're bringing people to the team, especially early, they better have something like you're talking about. They better have that superpower. And then, right, so I think that there is a component of doing it deliberately, but finding, like, the best people that you can. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, it's okay. The other, you got me very curious about, because I love formulas. I love systems. I love processes. I love... Right. Let's untangle this a little bit. You said you had a ranking factor. You're like, if it ranks 8, we're good to go, or 8 to 10 or whatever, and 7 maybe not. And you know, what can you peel that apart a little bit more? Like, what are those ranking factors?
Right. There's a little arbitrariness to it, right? Like,
yeah,
when you fill out, like, we've got criteria that we would look at to say, like, you know, size of the market, right? All the basic things that if you were an investor, I would be able to at least articulate some degree that it's whatever, a whatever rating that is. And then adding that up and looking and saying, okay, well, how do we, what's going to be the best way to approach this, right? What has the highest ranking and therefore the highest likelihood for success? And we want to bring that to all our roadmap stuff, right? Like, it shouldn't be like this, you know, there should be a matter of saying, okay,
look at this,
cost,
this.
How quickly can we get it to market? Right. Like with Nulu, we're trying to figure out what are the appropriate accessories, right? For us, with that, like, a knife is one thing, but a knife, part of the thing we have to overcome with a knife is the whole everything around it, right? Sheaths and sharpeners and all kind of stuff, right? There's a lot of ritual with knives, you know, the different kinds you use and sharpening it. It's very ingrained in the psyche. So that creates opportunity, because all the ancillary items like sharpeners, cutting boards specifically designed for the knife, bowls that fit, right? Like, this can be used in a bowl. So a bowl that fits this means you can work in the bowl and stuff doesn't fly everywhere. Can't do that with a normal knife. So those kind of things, but it is taking an approach. And I think that helps with the egos, right? Where if you can come to something where it is, mathematically figured out, then I think it's easier to get reflective, right? There have been times I've gone into meetings with hey, here's how I want to go. And my partners are like, nope. And, you know, ultimately I could probably say, you know, but it's just not appropriate. It's not productive. And I don't think it's the path to success.
Yeah. And you kind of figured out this formula, or whatever you want to call it, the ranking, from
you know,
your
it's
first...
funny though. I was listening to there's a podcast I listen to called Crucible Moments, and I don't remember what one they were talking about, but it was another company that kind of done the same thing. And it was cool, right? It's like this validation of like, whoa, right. I wish I'd listened to that sooner. But it's this validation of like, okay, we're still instinctively making the right decisions for companies that have overcome the things that make, you know, whatever percentage of companies fail. Like, this drives my partners crazy, but they like the optimism. Is one of them said to me one day, well, you know, X percent of companies fail, whatever, 90%. And I say, yeah, but if I thought that was us, I wouldn't be doing this. And two, what contributed to the failure, right? And that's where I appeal to some of their military thinking is, you know, was it conditions beyond their control? Did they build it? Like, there are so many things. And I'm not saying you can get it to the flip-flop, to the inverse of like 10% failure, but you can surely create a company that has a higher percentage. So, you know, I used to work in the divorce space, and statistics drive me crazy. We're talking about mathematical stuff, and you know, you would hear from people, well, it's a great place to be in lending because 50% of divorces or marriages end in divorce. And I'm like, yes, but what I care about is when. I don't make money on a divorce 10 years from now. right? So when you actually look at the number and strip out socioeconomic numbers and all that, it was like at any given time, maybe between 2.5 to 3.5% of the population in the socioeconomic level that's going to need a mortgage is looking, would fit my client base.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of these things where I try and not take statistics that people consider as sacrosanct. I look at it and I say no. And I would have actually providers call me and go, hey, you know this. And I'm like, no, you're wrong. You don't know that. You obviously didn't research me either because I've written on the subject. But that's where I look at the percentage, and it's almost, how do I make that percentage better, right? Like in the Army, you would look in, if I was in the artillery, right? And let's say we were hitting the enemy, and they would say suppression, destruction. You literally had a mathematical formula. If you eliminated this percent of the enemy's combat power in an artillery barrage, you either the outcome was sort of defined by a set thing. It wasn't just like, it wasn't arbitrary. And I think that's a really good way to think of things. You should always be looking at, what can I do to shape the battlefield or the landscape in business to increase my odds of being successful and decrease my odds of being unsuccessful? And I'm sure people would listen and say, well, no shit. But how many times do people do it in a really deliberate manner? Right? It's like, I should lose weight. Well, yeah, but what are you going to do to make that happen? That's where I think the change happens. And that's where I've just been, again, really fortunate to have people who understand that and say, okay, I'm on it, and we're going to solve things that way.
Yeah. Amazing. Good stuff. So where are you at today with the business? I mean, how you guys are, you're launching something, you're doing a Kickstarter. What are you doing?
We did the Kickstarter, which it's very interesting. And again, this is where I always, like when people ask me, I was like, you got to look at things contextually right. So we did a Kickstarter from October to December, and we tried out some things. Like, we wanted to raise money. I had some lofty stretch goals, but we hit our goal. We exceeded the goal.
Nice.
And it was really funny, though. It's one of these things where I think the lesson I learned was, you see Kickstarter, and I had friends. I have a good friend who he's in the art world, and Kickstarter is great for him. It was okay for us. I don't know if it was the right place, because then I was like, have I ever bought anything on Kickstarter? I had never bought anything at Kickstarter, but I felt it was essential. So I should have asked that question, but we did well. We actually got a lot of, I think we would have done better had it been available. Again, this is an earlier prototype. Our manufacturing took a little bit of a delay with all of the nightmare regarding the tariffs, right? It's still unresolved, but we got pushed back a little with our manufacturer because there's bigger players who were ordering big orders to get ahead of the tariffs. And all this fell around the Chinese New Year. So still perfectly in a great place. My partner actually had a meeting with our manufacturer at SHOT Show, and things are going well. So we really consider the Kickstarter a soft launch. We're going to be able to meet the demands of all the backers. In March, we should be getting then our full initial order where we can really start selling in April, May timeframe. And we expected that 30 days earlier. But what's interesting is it's been a lesson, because I have a full marketing team. And what I said was, okay, can't sell the knives until April. Really, it doesn't impact anything if we get the Kickstarter people what they need. And what I said to my marketing team was, okay, now you guys have 60 days really instead of maybe 45, right? So it's what now do I get versus, like, the delay bought me something, right? Like, again, I'll bring it to a military thing. If the enemy gets held up for 3 hours, that gives you 3 more hours prep for a defense, right? So we're looking really, really, we're in a great place. And the other thing I think it taught me as an entrepreneur is, again, to kind of go your own way, because I do hear, like, if you're full-time, I'm full-time. If you're part-time, then something like the delay on knives doesn't matter, right? You've got a job, you just deal with it, unless timing is an issue. But for me, now being full-time entrepreneur, I think it just says, okay, where am I going to spend the time now? In my personal situation, I went to my partners and said, hey, we have one of these 9.5 to 10 products. My wife was actually going to head it up. I was going to help her. And I'm like, boom, let's get in an accelerator. Let's get that rolling. Because I'm looking at it and saying, I want to have a portfolio of revenue stream creating products as opposed to a singular product that's going to be my live or die. And again, we took the conscious decision to say simple products, right? This is 3 pieces. The one that we're selling initially is one monolithic piece. It's got the blade with a handle, injection molded on. Other products are sort of non-mechanical, no gears, no electronics. They're just things that you can make. So I think it gives us the latitude to do it, but I think it means if you're going to be an entrepreneur, do you want simplicity or do you want complexity? Simplicity means that you can pivot a little more. Complexity, I'm in a lot of these, I've been through an accelerator kind of and a half. I'm going back to one. And you see people with these really complex ideas, and it's like, wow, one problem, So we're doing good. I'm really excited. It is a roller coaster. It's one of these things where you're like, you reach out to somebody. We've been trying to reach influencers and stuff, and you get beat up, and then you get great news from SHOT Show. And, I think people just have to be, I wrote an article about pessimistic optimism, or was it optimistic, pessimistic? But basically knowing that shit's going to go wrong, but being optimistic about the ability to work through those. Yeah. So I think it's optimistic pessimism. And I think you have to have that viewpoint as doing anything, right? Like even in corporate America, my rally cry to people in corporate America is you're not as comfortable as you think you are. You're not as safe as you think you are. So you really should be planning for contingencies. And if it means having a hobby that you can monetize or commercialize, then great. But I do think that more shit's going to go wrong than not. So you got to know that's going to go wrong and be optimistic about it. I think actually too, being a prepper has helped being a good entrepreneur because you're always thinking about what can I do wrong, what's going to go wrong and what can mitigate that.
Sure.
I always use the term prepper because there's so many pejoratives about it, and it does with some of the militia movements and stuff. It's gotten a bad name, but I think it's like I live my life with every aspect of that, right? Like I'm always, what can go wrong? How can I mitigate it? And it makes my family sometimes crazy, but I think that does bleed over into everything. And almost full circle, you ask about the military, like what shaped that? There's a lot of that in there, right? Like chow will not make it sometimes. Your subordinate's sleeping bag is going to fall off a vehicle and you're going to have to give them yours, and freeze your tuchus off. And all that stuff's going to go wrong, and it's going to be how you respond to it and not how you, don't be reactionary. But if you've done the right things, then it's very hard, though, being a prepper with teenage kids that, don't wear socks in the wintertime and, don't have coats or don't wear coats.
I was going to say they keep going into my stash of stuff.
Yeah, believe me. Somebody referred to God, what's his name? The senator that wears shorts, and he's like, that's everybody's teenage son, right? Like, and it is like, so that keeps me in check on some of my prep.
Yeah. No, these are awesome lessons because I just, as you're talking about that, I think about, I think maybe I don't know how critical of a skill or thought process that is preparing ahead. Like I think back at there was a time frame, I don't know, 2014 through 18. I had a job. I had a career. I was hired as a web developer, for a company. But during that whole time, it was amazing. I loved my time there. I learned so much. I built a team. We did a lot of stuff. But during that whole time, I was like, this may not last forever, and what am I going to do next? And what am I preparing for? So I was learning, I was thinking forward, like, what if this all comes crashing down, which it eventually did. And then I went out and started my own agency. I was ready for that though. Within days of me leaving there, I was already building my business. And it's the same with my business now. Last year, a lot of things happened, but I was prepared for it. I was prepared to do what we needed to do to survive, and we're thriving now again. But that's really, really important. And
I think there's a resiliency that people need, and people throw around like sheeple as a a label. And, I think in political terms, I'm not talking that, but I think there is a sheeple aspect to some degree to corporate America where they've created a structure where you need them more than they need you. You're working for benefits and the least amount that they can pay, right? Their goal is shareholder equity. And as a result, I think that there does need to be more resilience. There needs to be a flip-flop, because the problem is the current structure also, I feel, kills innovation. I think, on the podcast we started the other day, we were talking about the problem with, big companies. Sometimes the hierarchy gets so cemented that everything is in service of the hierarchy and not losing your job, right? Because now, if they've done the right thing and they're paying you just enough to keep you and you're sticking around for benefits and all that, then you need that job. So your decisions are based on that. And I don't think I'm going to change corporate America, but I think people's thinking does need to change, because this is where they get caught off guard, right? I'm sure there's 5% of people working for Facebook right now or Meta who are not expecting to be out of work, right? And the other thing that I think happens, and this is the one advice I would give people in sort of living deliberately, is, and I'm throwing a lot of trite things out, but your network is your net worth. Having failed that test so many times in corporate America, because again, you're at the service of the hierarchy, they don't want you out networking, even if it will benefit them, because then I take a different view. I used to tell people that work for me, even in corporate America, I would tell them, I am interviewing to be your boss every day. And that's how I looked at it. And I don't know if maybe that hindered some of my progress. I believe in managing down, not up. And I believe that's another military aspect, right? You're a servant leader at the service of the people who you are leading. Right. And that's been lost. I think we used to have it, but I don't know how you can have it when the person in charge considers you expendable and makes 100 times what you do. There is something inherently wrong. I would love to think I'm that valuable to my company. Right now, I'm of the value that my partners and I have defined. And I just think that there's a mismatch there. And I think that the quicker people start realizing that and emphatically deciding what their own value is, and if the only way that value is realized is by doing your own thing, then do your own thing and find out a way to make that happen. And there's so many, the great part now is there's so many good resources. There's great podcasts, the democratization of information, resources. I mean, when I kind of was entrepreneurial 20 years ago on a side hustle, no AI, early phones, now look at, you can really go at it, right? There is such opportunity. And, I've been thinking about this concept. I really want to do some writing about it, is being creative versus consumptive. Building versus being a builder, right? Like you're a podcast. Being a builder, not a consumer. We consume and consume and consume, and we hate ourselves for it. Yeah. The time that changed in my life was when I decided that I'm going to be a creator and a builder. This has become my medium. Invention has become my medium. People need to find their medium, right? Yours is web design and all this stuff. And this. Telling great stories, letting people tell their stories. People just need to find their medium. And in a time when different people are wondering about what the future is going to look like. And, I sit out there and I see social media posts and all this about what's going to happen. I'm in a really good one, with a bunch of West Point people who are, it's called Restore Honor. And it's really about, it's sort of apolitical. You can guess there's a political group that is not involved by choice, but generally it's a lot of us who are saying, there's a better way to do things. But I've been really stricken by the amount of West Point people that I know who are, hey, what do we do? What should be our action? And I'm like, action. It's not what should it be. It's action. Action, and I look at that across the board. And it's been, again, transformational, right? I've been even building better relationships. Not that my wife and I had a bad relationship, but one day I looked and said, geez, I'm putting so much time in all this other stuff, right? boom,
You're
totally
neglecting.
changes,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
and I think that is part of it, right? It's that action part of it. So I don't know, I've become to realize that I'm unique in a lot of ways, right? The way I think and everything is unique, but that doesn't mean that other people can't sort of find that uniqueness and where they want to be and all that
Yeah.
and find happiness, right? Like I've lost weight, my numbers are better, everything has gotten better since I decided that money wasn't going to be the only thing that I chased, because I stayed in corporate America for that reason. And oddly enough, I think more money will come from having that. Now, all this, of course, depends on, do you have something you can commercialize, right? Like, and the best way I can articulate, when I went through some of these accelerators, people had passion projects that will never create money. And by that, I don't mean money like Elon Musk money, let's say, but money that you can exist, right? So I think that there's got to be some realism to it as well.
Absolutely. Well, this is good stuff. I have more to add, but I'm gonna hold back because we'll be here all afternoon, all day. What time is it? Oh, it's still morning, which would be fine, but we try to keep it under an hour.
No, absolutely, absolutely. No, and I'll have to send you one of the other products because I think it's going to be an interesting narrative with my wife and I doing a business together. So I have to. It's a winning product. Like I can't wait. I was up till like 2 a.m. last night doing some modeling on it, and it's going to be amazing. So I'll have to reach out with you when we're ready to prototype that one.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. I love this. I love your story. I love what you guys are doing, why you're doing it, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys be out there. I'll be going through a store one day, and I'll see Nulu, and I'll have to pick up. I have a few knives here. Hold on. I have some knives right by my. It's a throwing knife.
Can I do a crocodile?
Like 30 years ago. What's that?
Can I do a crocodile Dundee?
Yes, please. Yeah, I got my little knife, my little throwing knife. I don't even know why I have it.
There you go. That's not a knife. That's a knife. Right. So, yeah. So. Right. But you know what? No, that's totally cool. Like I think knives are really super cool thing, and the thing I would tell people with knives, and this is a cool thing, is find all the cool ones out there that aren't just tactical. Like they're very, very cool, like cultural knives. Yeah. And what I like is it's kind of a thread of like why people like food as an example, because you learn a lot about a culture. Like when you look at like the knife of a culture, like Filipinos, like there are so many like fighting knives out of the and it's like, wow, they really like to fight with blades,
Yeah,
and then it's like, wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even the Nulu, like this is the logical evolution of the ulu, which is an Inuit knife, and was just really, really good and practical. And we backed into, okay, that's why we named it the Nulu, because it's in a sense the new ulu.
Very cool.
That would be the everything knife. So
we learned. Wow, I'm glad we stayed on for an extra 2 minutes here because we just learned something else cool.
I have way too many stupid things to talk about.
Doug, might have to have you on again someday. I'm sure we will. But anyway, so if somebody wants to learn more about what you guys are doing, Nulu, where do you want to send them? Where do you want them to show up? And if they want to reach out to you and chat, maybe where you hang out on the web?
Best place would be NuluKnives.com. There's not anything there right now besides sort of like placeholder because we're updating the site, but you could get to the Kickstarter from there. If you go to Kickstarter and put in our name, you can find us there. I personally am on LinkedIn. I have a professional Facebook, and then I started a Substack so they can find me on there because I do some writing about about adaptive design and some things there as well. They can find that. And then we have all our official pages. But I have a very large digital footprint because of all the other stuff I did. And, I wrestled with that. I'm like, oh, do I take down my old podcast? I'm like, no, it was actually good, right? Like, I think it tells that story. So, put in Doug Katz. Although, funny story. Can I end on one funny story?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So, if they look for Doug Katz, they'll find me. But they will also find, and it's a guy that I've been corresponding with. We're trying to do something together. But there is a James Beard recognized chef in Cleveland, of all places, named Doug Katz. So somehow I want to bring together the Doug Katz is culinary and chef's knife together. So we've been talking and
fun.
But so I'm not that Doug Katz because that mistake could be made.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Good stuff. Well, thanks for joining us, Doug. Thanks for sharing your story and
no technical issues. So great. I enjoyed it so much.
We made it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But
hopefully,
you're a super great interviewer. I really love the conversational. I love the conversational component. So, just let me know how I can promote this as well. I'll be sharing it in my network, but would love to get more eyes on your show too, because I think it's important. I do think people need to learn how to build things. They need to not be afraid of it. They need to pick up the skills, and we need to start doing that stuff again.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. Until next time.
You got it. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Builders Podcast. One more quick note about our sponsors. At Unified Web Design, we're passionate about doing better together, partnering with agencies and businesses to deliver exceptional web design, development, and ongoing support. And Unified Plugins offers tools to take your WordPress projects to the next level, helping you build beautiful websites, enhance functionality, and drive more conversions. If you haven't already, subscribe or follow to stay updated on future episodes. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, sharing it with somebody who might benefit helps us grow this amazing community. Until next time, keep building with intention and creativity.